Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Tuesday, April the 18th, 2023 session in our series on entrepreneurship in Asian high-tech industries. I'm Richard Dasher. I'm the host for this series. I direct the U.S. Asia Technology Management Center that produces the series, and we want to say a special thank you to our member companies that support our center because it's really their support that allows us to put on the series. Today, I'm very excited that we're joined by Dr. Andy Zheng, who is the founder and CEO of Pear City. And Andy is coming to us really from Chengdu, China, to talk about the use of mobility as a service, which is what his company does. And he is quite active in the Chengdu region. He's also as an international operation in Singapore that may be getting active now that we're coming back out of COVID. So Andy has his PhD from that school across the bay, but we're delighted to have him come over and share his ideas with us. Please check the website, the page for the course on asia.stanford.edu to find more about Andy's bio, and we'll get started right now. Andy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you very much for inviting me for the talk. And I also want to acknowledge two of my partners here, Dr. Zhang and also Charles at the back. We do this together in Chengdu since 5 years ago. I came from the other side of the bridge, not directly, via Hong Kong, because now I am based in Chengdu, China. So during COVID, I'm kind of like there for 3 years without any international travel. But that also gives me time to concentrate on developing products that will be impactful to help us drive our cities to be towards zero emission and also making the quality of life better for people, because we don't want to waste our time in traffic jam, right? So the title of the talk today is Data Infrastructure for Sustainable Mobility in three metrics later I will talk about, right? So basically providing affordable, fast, and green mobility for the people in this context of fighting climate change, etc. I wear two hats. One is a founder and chief scientist for Pear City. I want to just add a note there. It's more like a chief communication officer for with scientists that we work with, because we work with quite a few universities. Also, I'm a Zheng Fellow at the Singapore Lee Kuan Yew Center for Innovative Cities. As many of you may know, that Singapore is really very good at public transit. Most people take public transit instead of cars. And also Singapore is very good at urban planning. So it's like a garden city, right? So in my role there, I really learned a lot from my fellow colleagues there. So here is kind of showing you this tall building. We are located on the 17th floor of this tall building in Chengdu, and Chengdu is actually quite modern now. It has, for example, for the subway network, it has almost 600 kilometers. So Singapore has 250 by comparison. So the subway network is more expensive than New York City, than London and Singapore and Tokyo, the subway system. So it's really a huge system with a serving population of 20 million. And also on the left upper corner, you see the screen. That's kind of the control room for mayors of Chengdu. So via this room, they are able to see everything. And also what is showing in that wall, right, in that room is our system 3 years ago. So we have evolved quite a bit after that. So on the right upper corner is where you see in this particular city, what is the trips we're talking about? What is the carbon emission every day we're talking about, right? So just give you a comparison, the Chinese version of Uber in this particular city has about 1 million trips a day. But if we talk about public transit, like subway, it's already like 2.8 million a day, average across workday and weekday and weekends. And also there are like another 2.3 million trips, bus trips. And also like there are about 2.5 million share bike trips connecting between the subway station and your home or your offices. Later, in the second part of this talk, I will show you 5 minutes demo video of the system showing all the live data of evening peak hours. So what is special about Paracity is also because of my background. I have done a PhD from a school on the other side of the bridge. So my advisor, Professor Dan Kamen, is our chief advisor for our company. And we also have another advisor, Dr. Lin Chongpeng, who is based in Singapore, did a lot of sales of Oracle and HP stuff in Asia Pacific. So he is helping us to kind of think about what will be a good business model to scale with speed in this process. Also, like in Chengdu itself, our team worked with quite a few professors over the past 3 years, thinking ahead, doing research, leading the smart mobility innovation in that particular city in this context of COVID, right? The cross-city mobility is quite limited back then. For example, Professor Wu Peng, he did his postdoc in Cambridge. Professor Xiao Feng, he did his postdoc in UC Davis. That's how we know each other. And Professor Xiaolan Chen, he did his PhD both in Beijing University and UC Berkeley. And that's how we know each other. So for Pear, actually, these are all the pictures showing you before COVID. Back then, one of our role is being a bridge between the government and research, basically being a translator of in smart city what the government needs, right, has practical value, and what the research community can provide in terms of solution. We're kind of a translator between them. So back then, you see that we do business and with Singapore, Buenos Aires in Argentina, Guangzhou in China, and also Chengdu, where our R&D center is based. So we also work with quite a few universities, UC Berkeley, and also the EV50 here in Stanford back in 2019. And the COVID just kind of paused everything. Yeah. Before I go into the details and examples of what we do, this is how we are seeing the smart city in terms of value chains, right? So in terms of smart city, most cities, they are in phase 1, where the government is paying the taxpayers' money to build those sensors, collecting the data, having them in the servers. But most cities are not really using the data for practical use. So that's where Paracity comes in. So basically, we develop this MaaS platform very much like Microsoft Windows operating system. And the data does not come out of your server. We just install our operating software in your server, and all those stuff later you will see will be operating just within 1 to 2 weeks. And then the third phase of this is where a smart city needs to be able to feed itself, fund itself sustainably, right? It has to generate revenue every year to pay for all this data collection, pay for all those servers computing, and also pay for Pear, right? So that's where, like, after you have this actionable data insights, then all these city level data APIs can be shared with companies, with users like Google Maps, which is Ali Map in counterpart in China, and also Uber, etc. So that's kind of what we see the process in smart city. The first stage is getting the data. Second stage is processing the data as the raw materials like crude oil into data insights, which is gasoline, which has higher value, economic value. But that's not enough. You have to distribute the gasoline to your users and generate profits, right? Sustainable. So I borrowed this word from Richard this morning, generating ongoing value and profit. So it's sustainable. So for example, like when we see smart city in the future, and this is actually what's happening in Chengdu in China, is that when government is trying to guide the transport operation, it wants this to be quite an automated process where sensors is collecting the data, and then this data analytics and AI are discovering the problem real time, also historical pattern for better urban planning. And then there will be automated responses being done. Later, I will show one example in share bikes near the subway stations. And then after you respond to these problems, right, then there are also the data is continuously monitoring the metrics until the goal is reached. So it's a result-driven process, automated process. So with that, kind of the background, how we are seeing this smart city in phases and etc. So where does Pericon sits in all this? In this phase 2 is that we use data and AI in this mobility as a service platform, trying to do 3 things, help every city worldwide to do 3 things. One is to electrify smarter, because we have papers about the Shenzhen EV taxis. Later I will talk about this as well. If you don't electrify smart, it actually generates problems for drivers, it generates problems for commuters as well. But the data really can help you to pinpoint where the root problem is and how to resolve it, almost with no money on the table, right? Secondly is a congestion. I haven't been back in the Bay Area for quite a few years, and the traffic is so horrible. It's congestion is really a problem. So I think a clear problem is, unless you can widen your road further, right? I think the clear solution is that you need the bus, subway, etc., which needs to be integrated with others, right? We need to talk about from A to point, seamlessly integrated trip. If you only provide me with bus services, I have to walk like 2 miles to my house. It won't work, right? So this is what we are doing in Chengdu as well. The third part is the physical budget part. I don't know about the status in United States, but in China, like all those major mega cities in China, like top 10 ranked by GDP, every city every year is almost like funding at least 3 billion yuan a year to bus companies, right? And it's so expensive, especially because of COVID, has a very negative impact on the local cities' physical health. So it's no longer affordable. Therefore, government is right now, the cities in China is in urgent needs to find ways to reduce cost and also increase ridership, right? So that's where this could be useful. Yeah, this is what I'm talking about. So now I go into some of the things we did, and which also published in papers or in collaboration with US universities. So we just need some data such like this, very simple data comes in, and our layers of model, our advanced analytics can get useful, actionable, and useful insight out of it. For example, this is a project we launched in 2019. And then this is also, as you can see, is Duke University Center for Advanced Insights. They found this project in 2021 as well to do further study on the impact on lower to mid-income workers. That's where what we are talking about is using data in this smart city context to improve the quality of life. In this context, is really making taxi drivers more efficient, so they have better quality of life, right, with less time. So it's a very simple thing. Using the data, and we basically give the drivers 4 colors in terms of different regions in the city, in red, orange, green, and blue. Red means that in serious shortage of taxis. Orange is that it has less wait time than average. Green is kind of supply and demand in equilibrium. So this is kind of what you see, right? So basically, only top 8 hotspots, they already are like 15% of the city's total taxi demand. So we are monitoring actually 30 hotspots in the city, which represents more than 80% of the taxi demand, including the airports, high-speed rail train stations, and this is what you see, right? So basically, this is where data plus data insights plus design in it, because in the very beginning, when we do this, right, we give them all the metrics, but the driver don't know how to use it. So, but later when we engage with the Duke University and we have some designs to just 4 colors, right? It's very easy for them to recognize, and then it works better. So this is another example of the Shenzhen EV taxis back in 2019. Together with Professor Dan Cameron, we published a paper. If you're interested, later we can send you the details. Basically, the story is this. And the Shenzhen taxi, by the way, is also featured in Bill Gates' this book. So he looked at Shenzhen EV taxi and EV bus with admire of how scale with speed is done in Shenzhen, right? But when you do this scale with speed without data, it actually is a problem. The problem is that you see this this photo is actually one of my group mates from Berkeley, Gordon Bauer, right? We go together at this charging station. Below, you see, it has like 637 fast chargers back then in 2019 at one location. It's the largest one in China. I think maybe the largest one in Asia as well. But the problem is that, you know, in the afternoon, you see a line, a continuous line, maybe 200, 300 taxis waiting outside. And then you have them charging here for another 2 hours. So we are joking is that if you look at this, okay, I didn't have another figure, but basically this generates a problem. The problem is that because the taxi driver need to change shifts at about 6 p.m., so they have this kind of inherent habit, routine of changing shift at full tank of gasoline. So therefore, they also charge their EV battery to almost 100%, right? So very slow, took you 2 hours. And everybody is living close by. Those are all immigrants from other, not really Shenzhen residents, right? So that
2 hours, they're not earning any revenue, right?
Precisely. And the worst thing is this, because we are joking, because the taxi driver are either charging their cars or waiting in line to charge their cars or driving to wait in line to charge their cars. So therefore, there are starting from almost 3 p.m. in the afternoon, it's very difficult for the residents in Shenzhen to get a taxi. We have the data that are showing you that, right? So this is what we mean by without data, you electrify the transportation with speed and scale. Without data, then you create problems. And then what we find out, all those with data, we find out the problem is about the changing shift with full tank of electricity, battery, and also because they live close by, right? So actually with that, we give them 3 suggestions via the Shenzhen Transport Authority and the Shenzhen Taxi Association to tell every driver that, first of all, charging a battery above 90% is not safe and it costs time, half an hour more, right? So maybe 90% is sweet spots, you should stop, right? Secondly is that when you change shifts, we actually design in our app, we design a very nice feature for them. When you change shift, you actually do not need to your evening shift driver actually do not need 90% SOC. Sometimes they only need 70%, full, and then they can already sustain the evening shift all the way to 3 a.m. in the morning, where already no demand for taxis, right? So therefore, it's actually a lot of waste there. So once they get away from this full tank change shift routine, then the choices of charging station and also the time window for charging expands. And then this waiting in line problem just disappear like that, right? So it's basically using data to find out that actually there are some problems with the behavior, with the previous behavior. Then you are advising on a new behavior, behavior change. Actually, it's more effective and faster solution than building more chargers like that. So here are some data. Actually, in the paper, you can see that. So, 60% of them who do the change shift, actually, they are less than 2.5 kilometers close to their change shift location, between the charging station and the change shift location, right? So that's where you see that they want to be as close as possible. So it's close to 100%, right? Like that. Also, 75% of them, they charge all the way more than 90% SOC. But back then, actually, there are 65% of the drivers that are already as smart as what we find. They charge their cars, taxis during noon, during lunch, and then they just pass the car to the evening shift drivers. And on average, you see they earn more, and we do the comparison. So this kind of the data insights we gain. Some drivers are already gaming the system in a way, right? So we're just telling every driver you should do this, and then the problem solved. It's documented in a paper we published in 2020. The work is done in 2019 about the Shenzhen taxi. So here is like showing you is this is a number for by end of 2018, you already see the Chinese megacity is ranked by GDP, right? already they're electrifying the bus fleets and taxi fleet almost close to 50% to 100% EV penetration. So that's why back then you see the science article talk about China's key role in scaling those low carbon technologies. Because actually, when you scale with speed, those low carbon technologies, there are valuable lessons to be learned that other cities worldwide can just use, right, without paying anything. And also, like recently, Stanford, right, got this generous donation from Mr. John Doerr, like 1.6 billion, right? His new book about speed and scale talks about when we are fighting climate change, it's very important that every major carbon emitters need to participate. And also we need to get this thing done as fast as possible, as massive as possible. So that's why I think data really play a very important role, vital role for us to drive to carbon neutral in a most cost-effective way, because the normal way is very expensive or in general is very problematic. So here is actually showing you for the MaaS one, right, how this can pay for itself. We did a study back in 2021, benchmarking Chengdu with Shanghai, Guangzhou, against Singapore, London, New York City, and Tokyo. Here you see that in terms of population, metropolitan population or city downtown population, and also in terms of the scale of the supply. Like for example, subway system in Chengdu is 558 kilometers, right? So in London, it's only 100 years of history of tube, right? 400 kilometers. And New York City, in terms of metro, is 368, right? So in terms of scale, China is really massive in terms of this. And so therefore, we talk about AI, big data. Also, it's very valuable for us to learn lessons of how do we electrify the urban mobility most cost effectively. But another thing is that because China is building all this very fast and the city are expanding, so on the efficiency is not really that level compared with Singapore, which is a very well managed public transport sector. So that's where using data and the learning from Singapore's transport planning and the regulation experience lessons that this can be done faster.
Could you explain the bus efficiency a little bit more? I don't quite understand. Person per day per bus.
Thank you.
How many people are riding a single bus each day?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so not the bus line, but a single vehicle.
So basically this figure, right, is not a perfect figure, but it's kind of something we can get as best as possible, right? Like to kind of benchmarking all these cities together. So basically this efficiency is your ridership divided by your supply, right? So the supply is how many buses you have in the city operating. Then the ridership, right, is how many ridership you have every day. So this ratio is kind of indicative of how well you are utilizing your bus assets. The same thing applies for the subway, where how large is your subway network and what is your daily ridership, right? So for example, Singapore only has like 232 kilometers of subway, but it commands such a huge daily ridership. So therefore, the metrics here is that every kilometer of subway in Singapore actually serves on average 15,000 riders every day, average across weekdays and weekends. Yeah. So one of the answer we feel, and also just now I talk about the physical challenge for different cities, right? Here is a number we collected firsthand, looking at Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen in terms of their bus subsidy, right? So you look at this is that actually per person per trip, for example, in Shenzhen, right, per person per trip, this one, can you see my mouth here? Yeah. So in Shenzhen per bus trip, the residents are only paying 2 yuan per trip, but the government has to subsidize almost 4.77 yuan per trip, which means that actually the whole thing is not operating efficiently. Therefore, they are making a loss almost 2/3, more than 2/3, right? So that's where data comes in to optimize the routes, to increase the speed, right? To also to attract more ridership. so that you can break even, right? I think a realistic target right now is to help those bus companies to try to break even sustainable. Yeah. So one lesson I think China can learn from the United States is that, this is another one. I don't know how many of you are using this express lane. You are all, basically you are providing one option that you can travel faster, but at a cost. Right. So I understand, like, for example, I-680, it has like 12 miles southbound, 12 miles northbound. The investment is only like 56 million compared with these billions of subsidy every year, right? 56 million. But every year in 2021, I read the report is that they're collecting 4 million a quarter. Every quarter, 4 million. So therefore, annual revenue is like 16 million. Which translates to almost 30% return to their capital investment, right? So I think China can do this as well. Where you see this map here is like in Chengdu, it has like 1,000 kilometers of bus lanes. So you can view this bus lanes as the express lanes. If a similar business model can be applied there, first of all, you are helping all the buses to travel twice as fast. So they can reduce their costs by half. Another thing is that if your buses travel faster and more reliably, you are able to attract more ridership, right? And then reducing costs by half and increase your revenue, then you are closer to break even that way, right? And our estimate is that if we are pricing this whole thing at about 4 yuan per kilometer per trip, right? Per trip per kilometer, it can help the Chengdu government to generate about 1.3 billion yuan a year. So if this thing later on I talk about tied to your green token, etc., then this really we're talking about 10 billion yuan a year in terms of incentivizing people, increase the public transit revenue there.
Slow down just a minute. This green mobility token.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, if people do something that is green, right? Something that's helping this system to be more efficient. Mm-hmm. They receive some sort of token.
Yes.
Who awards it? The city?
The MaaS platform.
The bus platform.
The MaaS.
Oh, the MaaS platform.
Mobility
your
service.
Your platform awards it.
Not necessarily mine yet. Right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The one we built.
Yeah. So in any case, you would be collecting people's data and whether they're riding bicycle or whether they're have changed their car to electricity or whatever. Mm-hmm. And based on that, you would award them some tokens.
Yes.
And then what do they do with the tokens?
So here actually I show you is that this is a very accurate way to incentivize people. I always say this, right? So like people now taking Uber, and in China, people take Didi, right? But in the very beginning, they have to burn money to attract you to use their services, right? But for such MaaS platform, there it's difficult for government to actually burn money to do that, right? You need to find a way that you don't need to use money, but you still can achieve the same effect. So one of the things is this: we don't reward people with money. We reward people with future saving in travel time. How do we do that? For example, this bus lane access. If you recharge,
so I've got these tokens that I've accumulated because I've electrified my car.
Yeah.
Then I could use a certain number of minutes or a certain
kilometers. Yeah.
In kilometers or whatever in the fast lane.
In the fast lane, yeah. And also what it will be different. I think I have been spending like 2 weeks here. I think one problem with the express lane here is that it's not on a reservation basis. So basically, sometimes a lot of cars are using the express lane. It turns out to be congested as well. Right? So this is a reservation basis. You take subway, you take bus, then there is certain reduction in your trip carbon emission. Then we reward you token proportional to your reduction in your carbon emission. Yeah. And then later on, you use this token to reserve for, let's say, you travel to Stanford tomorrow at 9 a.m., right? Yeah. If there, by our computing, the mobility brain, if there are excess capacity available for you, then it's accepted, then you can go. So this is the mechanism to making sure that at any given time, the bus will not be interrupted by private cars like yours,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
Yeah, you don't jam in front of a bus, right? So that's the idea. Another one is like after you have this, because in Asian cities, taxi is still a very big chunk. Just now I showed you the number. It's still a big chunk of the services. For example, during peak hours or evening peak hours, when it's difficult for you to get a taxi or Uber or Didi, right? So you can use this green token to beat ahead of others, right? You need to use some of them. Yeah.
Jump ahead.
Jump ahead, saving, yeah, precisely. Everything is about jumping ahead of the queue. But what is nice about this is that the residents, they use the green token to jump ahead of the queue. After the driver receives this token, they will be able to access another express lane at the airport, which we built. We say basically at the airport, like JFK or in China, the taxi driver have to wait for almost 2 to even 8 hours to get a ride, right? So after getting this token from resident commuters, then the drivers can also access this express lane at airport, saving them 2 to 6 hours. So it's almost, we are really making time as a currency.
How far along is this? Is this still in development, or is it ready to launch, or what?
It's ready to launch, and after this COVID exit, right, it's ready to launch. We are talking to a few cities in China to do this.
Okay.
Yeah. And also, 1 week ago, I was in Stony Brook and talking to this New York State, their smart mobility center, and discussing this. But actually, there's a question. Should I answer?
Go ahead. You can wait just a second. Can we get a mic real quick? Thank you. Because we're on Zoom, right? We've got a number of people participating on Zoom.
Oh, I was just curious, how is this system enforced so that you know that people aren't using the express lane without having the appropriate tokens, or how is this system enforced?
Yeah, it's actually very, very, very easy. If you look at the express lane here, right, the 56 million, as I understand, the 56 million capital cost for the I-680, the express lane, is like they're building those cameras to take your license plate, right? And also there is some transponder there reading your fast track, right? So the same thing, like in China already, like near the road network in the city, they already have cameras to take your license plate, right? So how it works is that you reserve from point A to point B, and we tell you what will be the travel time. Also compare with if you are taking a taxi or if you are driving your own car on normal lanes, right? So if you accept that, if you pay by the green token, then your license plate will be kind of in a whitelist. So when during that specific time window and at that certain segment, even if your license plate is being picked up, right? Because there is a whitelist of your license plate, therefore you will not be penalized. So the rest who does not reserve in advance, who is not in the whitelist, they will be penalized. Right, generate additional revenue for the transport authority. People need to ongoing,
Yeah, California State Highway Patrol doesn't need my revenue though. Yeah, okay.
Oh, more questions.
Okay, yeah, this is a good time. Let's take a few.
Yeah, I really like the whole idea of having some sort of incentive and stuff for to make people actually follow everything and make them come abroad. But I really want to know how you're gonna handle scalability when it comes to for example, you took the example of for example, you have to reserve a certain time for example if you're going from Stanford to Berkeley. But how do you make sure that as you scaling up, this is not gonna be a big problem? Because if a lot of people are trying to schedule for one day, and one day when you have 24 hours, how do you make sure that that this is still sustainable as you scaling up?
Yes. That's precisely what I'm pointing out, that the system needs the simulator there. Basically, simulating all of the here. The context is this: it's a bus lane, right? Bus lane, and on the rightmost lane, typically, right? So you need a simulator. Actually, is simulating 1 day ahead or 1 hour ahead all your buses and all the reservations, how the cars will be traveling. So you're making sure that you are not exceeding the threshold capacity of each of your bus lane. So therefore, once you reach the threshold, you do not take new bookings.
Yeah, let me add to that. This is classic big data analysis problem, right? If you've got the data about the traffic patterns and how crowded the regular streets are and how crowded the subway is and all of this, and you have this data about the how many tokens are being exercised or people plan to exercise, then you can allocate the tokens very well. It's classic big data. Yeah.
Supply demand on a real-time computing basis. Yes.
Sort of on like a similar vein, how, I guess, like, since demand is inherently cyclical, if you expect these like peak hours to sort of occur at the same time on a recurring basis, how do you like manage or preserve utility of this token? Because it seems like inherently, a lot of times when I want to exercise a token, it's also the same time other people want to exercise it. For example, when I go home from work, but then the same times that I'm willing to choose these low carbon options is like on the weekend or something, is the same time that other people are also willing to choose low carbon options. So I guess, like, how do you manage surge demand in a way that preserves utility of this token?
Yes, that's a very good question. So that's why I have another slide later I show is there needs to be a supply and demand. Basically, we have the data to know, for the channels we are giving out green token, how many tokens will be giving out every day. And for this reservation, how many tokens you will consume. For example, right, it's classic, like in express lane, they talk about they are using pricing as a mechanism to match supply and demand, right? So we are using the token. For example, right now, maybe we are charging you like 30 token per kilometer you are traveling during morning peak hours, right? So if we find that too many people are using this and exceed our capacity, we increase that to 50, right? So until a point where every day all of the token you accumulated will be consumed completely, right? Then that's the sweet spot. Because yes, you want to travel in the fast lane, but sorry, you don't have enough token, right? Yeah.
Yeah, great question. I think we should probably continue with your presentation before we go much. Is it a related question or a clarification question?
Go back to the earlier point about the EV waiting time. I was just wondering if the shift change time was an intractable element that you had to work around, or did you change that as well?
Thank you. So basically, the shift change time is fixed because the 6 p.m. is an ideal spot. It kind of bisects the demand half and half, right? Then it's fair that way. If earlier, then the evening shift will be gaining more, right? If later, then the evening shift will be losing out. So 6 p.m. is kind of ideal. And also it relates to morning shift. So everybody is having an equal 12-hour window. So what we did is analyzing the data there. What we did is that we tell them that you can do the same shift time, right? But you charge at a different time. You charge during noon, maybe at somewhere 50 kilometers away at the airport or at the train station, whatever, when you're having lunch, right? Because we have another figure, actually, Richard has it, is we analyze it at the same time when you have 200 taxis waiting at the station, and also you have another 500 charging at the same time. You also have empty chargers, which is not utilized, right? So when we look at the distribution, it's very, very striking to us. So then that's collecting all the data inside together. Then we find out actually the problem is that people drive because of this routine, because without the data inside, the taxi driver are forced to, they just go to a charging station next to near their shift change location, also right before their shift change time. So that's why you can see that all this activity becomes very concentrated unwisely in temporal space and also in spatial space, right? But once you tell people that drivers that you do not need to change shift at 90% even, just 70% is good enough for evening shift drivers to sustain until 3 a.m., then the whole problem changes, right? So I just can have lunch anywhere, charging to 90% or 100%, then I drive until 5 p.m., then I go to the shift change location, pass the car.
6 p.m. reminds me of the pattern where the shift change time is 5 p.m. and was well known to be impossible to find a taxi at the time when you most need it.
Yeah. Yes. So I think many.
So this is actually a general problem with any of this kind of planning.
Yeah.
People try to game the system, right? So they will always try to predict what will give them each individual will try to find what gives them an advantage in this system. So yes, this is why the model is always continually being revised, and why you have to, keep watching for model drift even.
Yeah. So
this is very much artificial intelligence enabled.
Yeah. And also a very important one, as Richard, you point out this morning, is that in this smart city, incentive design is very important, because no matter how good your data insight is, what is the action needed to be taken? But if you do not have the right incentive, people will not follow your advice. Then it's futile, right? So for example, just now that is providing the incentive, and we use the data to, we provide the data to the taxi association so they can educate drivers, especially here. The most effective one is here. When they see that actually there are drivers already doing this and they're earning more, it's very persuasive, the peer effect, right? Others are smarter than you already doing that, then they'll copy that. Another thing, when you're talking about Manhattan, actually, I talked with those guys, the JFK airport has a problem like Thanksgiving Eve, right? So this is also about incentive. The short trips from airport is problematic. And also during those peak hours when everybody needs a taxi in the city, it's very difficult for you to dispatch taxis to your airport. So this token still works. The express lane for taxi driver is also a subsystem for the whole green mobility token. For example, if you're taking a short trip, average is 20 miles. If you are taking 10 miles, then the driver gains like 10 tokens, right? And when he accumulates this, also when you need the taxi from the airport, you can also reward them with token. So the driver can earn this token by these actions that airports desire. And then what is benefiting, what is the incentive for the driver to do that is that they can use this token to also reserve the express lane at the airport, cutting like 2 or 6 hours of waiting time. So this is an incentive we are talking about, very important.
Okay. Let's go ahead with the presentation for now, and we'll come back. We've got some more time today later.
Okay. Yeah. So this is our framework when we're looking at how we provide MaaS to really, on the supply side, providing better options to the residents. On the demand side, we use green token as an effective incentive to kind of guide people to do what we think is desirable, right? Of course, it's in a democratic way. Yeah. I'll go very quickly here as, how different features that we help to integrate the subway bus and tech and the share bikes better seamlessly. And here is one of the things I talk about. So actually, Richard just mentioned about the green mobility token is kind of a currency system for mobility itself. But you also can talk to a bigger system like recycling, or those like low carbon options can also reward token. But then there is an exchange rate for them to exchange back to the green mobility token. And also itself has a subsystem I just mentioned about the taxi driver. When they get this token, the benefit for them is that they can cut queues at the airports. Yeah. So et cetera, et cetera. And also here is what one of the audience is talking about. How do you balance that, right? So basically, for this token, you have to do a pre-estimate, and also in real time you are issuing that, and also you need to monitor your performances. You're making sure that you are priced both at issuance or at consumption at the right pricing level, so that every day whatever you are issuing will be able to consume on a daily basis. Yeah. So this is another thing we did as talk about is because we have all this trip level data. So we build a trip level carbon accounting engine. So basically for every trip, it will be very, very accurately accounted what is your true carbon emission to that. And so to my knowledge, nobody in China at least did this before. Everything is like annual average for taxi or something like that. But this is really by different hour of the day and different day of the year and different region even. So what's next? My slides is ending soon. What's next is that, with all this AI, etc., we want to, first of all, our product is like operating system for urban mobility, pretty similar to the operating system for computers. And also I'm very honored to giving this talk at this Allen auditorium.
All Allen.
Or Allen Auditorium. So what's next is that besides what we are doing, we really want to partner with AI researchers, etc., to really making this tool easier to use, right? Easier to use meaning that, for example, this data insights report is more accurate. And the example, the second one is that this can help the regulators to do some design task much easier. For example, the figure you show here is that on 26th of March this year, Chengdu just opened a new airport for international flights, a huge one. So all of the international flights will be moved there. So then the airport needs to design the airport shuttle buses to transport people from this very far away airport to the Manhattan, so to speak, right? So then they need to design these lines. So basically they used our data analytics. They're showing existing taxi trip, existing subway trip, where do the people end up in the city, departing from the airport, right? So now this thing is done in a manual process. We're basically providing the insights for the regulators to make a decision, right? So what we want to do in the future is really making this, have a co-pilot for them. They will say, okay, I need to design airport shuttle bus routes for me. Maybe I need 5 of them, or what do you suggest? So automatically this thing can be done. This is what we are trying to do next. The third one is the problem solving, because just now we talk about in this MaaS, right? The bus connectivity or share bikes, etc. There are always this connectivity issue. Maybe when you do a geofencing, you ask them to tell you what is the problem related to green mobility in this area. They tell you what are the problems. Then next you ask, what are your proposed solution to that? Then they give you their solution. If this MaaS data platform can be done in that way, I think the adoption will be much better. Because when we are talking about deploying scale with speed in many different cities, it actually requires certain skill level from the people who are using it. So the easier it is, the faster and better it can be adopted, really with speed and scale. Yeah. So that's what we are moving ahead. And also this is some picture of me showing like besides building the platform and a lot of work we also did by engaging with the local decision makers, such as educating them with how to use the system, training them, and also you're engaging research and government talks about getting used to get academia coming in to give them advices on policy making, and also like training the transport regulator from all over the cities, all over the state, etc. So yeah, need to do many things. Another thing we are doing is that because we do this smart mobility on a city level cases, also there are some, for example, Chengdu is trying to build this Tianfu Youth City. Tianfu is short for another name for Chengdu. So they're building this youth city, wanting to housing like about 100,000 young entrepreneurs, researchers from all over the world to come to one place and to do to innovate, and everything will be a very light asset. The service apartment is done by Singaporean real estate developer service apartment, and the office is free, so people can come together, interact, and try to do this thing, using data, using digital tools to drive our cities worldwide to zero emission, as well as improve people's quality of life with speed and scale. Right. So this across country learning and interaction. Yeah. So with that, I want to Chengdu happens to also have a speed Chengdu version of speed meter. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
So that's great. Do you want to show the video or not?
Yes.
Okay. Why don't you stop sharing, because I'm ready to share it, I think.
Okay.
Now, if I just start it going, it should start, right?
Okay. Yeah, it's starting. So this is a 60-minute video showing you how this MaaS data platform is operating during evening peak hours in Chengdu. So because right now—
This was yesterday evening?
Yesterday evening,
like
yes,
okay.
Yes. Because right now it's, what's the time?
Morning in Chengdu now.
Oh yeah, right now it's like 8:30, yeah, 8:30. So basically here what you see is that showing you the in relation to all the subway station, the subway lines, where are the buses. And here is showing you, the red dots are the ones with very high demand for share bikes from the subway station.
For shared bikes.
For share bikes. Basically, I'm talking about, like, you have 3 million share bikes trips every day. So people get used to this habit of, I ride a bike to a subway station, I take the subway. So my trip time is very reliable, predictable. And then I take another share bike to my office. So that's already one of the multimodal trip that's very typical in Chengdu. So here is showing you the taxis, right? All the blue dots are where you have like more than 2 taxis at that square. And then the yellow one, again, showing you where more than usual amount of number of taxis are there. And the red ones are in the city now have extreme demand for taxis. That's where the regulators are very, aware. They need to be monitoring that. If there is in shortage, they go there. So here, just showing you all this data can drill down to each taxi, their historical trajectory, all of their trips taken, etc. So with all this data, then we do the analysis, layers of model to see how this is how can we encourage the commuters who are currently taking taxis to switch to subway and bus. Later I show. So here is showing you, for example, from the high-speed rail station, where do the people, after they taking taxi, where do they end up with? All these things is very valuable to design this, shuttle bus services, linking the transport hubs and your hotspots in your city, right? So this is typically it's called the OD analysis, origin and destination analysis. This is very, especially when you are making combining the taxi, ride hailing and share bikes all together. It becomes really, really valuable to see where are the trip demand that your bus operation is not currently serving well. This is for the e-hailing cars. You see that also you can see every single e-hailing car real time back then, and also their past 1 hour trajectory, and also how many trips they made every that day already, and seeing all this. So this is basically saying like the capability of collecting data real time, retrieving them every real time, and that leads us to the historical pattern part.
So it must have taken quite some time to use the data to train the model to this point.
Absolutely, 3 years, right?
Okay. Okay.
No wasted.
And I'm kind of curious, the simulator that you mentioned, this is actually a question from one of our participants on Zoom. Mm-hmm. Is this a full digital twin of the mobile systems in the city?
Absolutely, because I come from engineer training, right? So the data I mentioned about, although it seems simple, but those are actually the data you will need to replicate it in your digital simulation. Uh-huh. So that's why a lot of things we are not actually, a lot of indicators insights we have. Could you just pause here? I want to really get to this point.
Sure.
Yeah, pause here. Yes. Yeah, layers of model. Yeah, digital twin. Yeah, the short answer for that. Right now, what you see here is another interesting one. For example, London Tube, right? It has 100 years of the subway history. And if you look at their mayor's transport strategy, they talk about how to incentivize people to use less crowded line to get to where they are. So therefore, the rest of the people, they have less crowded line, right? So when we look at Chengdu, this 558 kilometers of subway, right? Residents also complain about very crowded in the morning, but how crowded it is and where are the bottleneck there? When you see this particular one is that throughout all this operation, it's only during work days at 8 a.m. to 9 a.m., only 4 sections is crowded, is exceeding your threshold, right? It's actually not that big a problem. But how do we solve that? Without, of course, one solution similar to the London Tube, they're building new lines or expanding the capacity, right? Another way similar to the Shenzhen taxi story is where you can use green token to incentivize some of the people to switch to the line to the left. The line to the left is, you see, they have the green ones, right? To the left, actually, they're going to the same location. And also many passengers already are actually that transferring to that red one, right? So instead of transferring to line 1, which is already crowded, you can transfer into line 5, which has half capacity empty available, right? But the way to do that is have that incentive structure where you maybe triple their green token issuance.
So they would get a suggestion on their smartphone.
Yes.
To if you switch from line 1 to line 5,
Right, yeah.
you'll get 5 tokens or you'll get 10 tokens.
For example, give me one example. For example, you go to your existing trip, subway trip, earn you like 5 tokens per trip, right? So if you switch, maybe they give you 20 tokens, right?
Yeah.
Quadruple that. And if you play this video, then again, keep playing. Actually, if you look at it, actually it's not that big change we need. We only need about 20% of the switching. Then everybody will be enjoying a smoother ride, right? So that's where we see smart cities. Sometimes you're really using data to coordinate between citizens to make smarter choices on a daily basis, empowering that. Yeah.
So a lot of this, your customer is the government itself, the city government, or within the city government, because a lot of the things are run by the government in China, right? Like the bus system or whatever.
Right.
Then go ahead.
Sorry, can you pause here again? Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah. So my question is, as you internationalize, you find very different situations where, the bus company will never talk to the train company and that kind of thing. Have you, what's your plans for international expansion?
So international expansion, I might want to use the Buenos Aires cases we had in 2019 for this. First of all, in China, the bus company currently are also competitors with the train subway companies.
Okay.
The same thing, because commercially they are competing for ridership, right? But then with this data, actually, you can help them, for example, help the bus company who are already very desperate to see a brighter future, a way out. So then it's a positive sum game for them. And for international markets, we understand that different cities, they may have different foundation in terms of data collection, the data infrastructure. So this thing does not require every bit of data needs to be there to start with. If you only have taxi data, you can use that. If you only have subway data, you can use that. So it's also like our experiences in Buenos Aires, for example, back in 2018, their transport secretary really liked the data insights we provide. For example, for airport, for taxi stand, then they say, hey, what does it take for me to use this? And I say, I need this data. They say, I don't have this data. Then we say, oh, maybe you need to have a tender for installing those devices, right? So it does not need to have 100% penetration for this to be useful, right? So that's the way. So typically for most advanced economies or cities, the data is already there.
Okay. Yeah. Do you think that in the future, Air City is going to be more of a B2C company where more of your revenue is coming from individuals who want help planning their day?
Yes, absolutely. When you go back to the slides I just mentioned about, right? So the different stages. Currently, we're at the stage of processing the data, processing the crude oil into gasoline, right? So this part is kind of to government, where government needs this smart city to the development. But later on, when as you point out, that for ongoing value and revenue creation, it has to be to see where each trip they actually benefited from your data insights. There is economic value there, and you have a business model to take certain portion of that economic value out of it. I remember Bill Gates once said that he is very, very rich because Microsoft did really good things to everybody. Office work, he said, really revolutionized that.
They rewarded him very well.
Very well, right? So if you generate like $100 trillion of value every year, I think it's okay for you to take 1 trillion as your profit.
So do you want more of the video?
Yes, the video here. So this is precisely what we're talking about, like incentivize people. So just now, talking about the carbon emission by neighborhood, right? Then here is like, for example, you are living in this neighborhood in this dashed line, right? So then from A to B, it tells you like if you switch, then what will be the your percentile ranking across that. Yeah. So I think it's then the last bit of this video is where the supply side. The supply side is that just now you talk about the subway station. Here's showing you that how the the bus company are using this tool to help them to optimize their bus route. Because now they already have like 560 kilometers of subway network. So they have to change. The bus company has to change. Here is you see that for this subway station, they are able to see all those exits, the bus lines, and then right now, where are the people taking taxis ending up with or taking taxi departing from, and whether this is served by the bus network. So, for example, if there are some strong demand for share bikes or for taxis, but you do not have bus stop coverage at the moment, so that's a clear sign for you to redesign your route a little bit to serve your customer better. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's what the data insight really can help. So for example, here you see those patterns of subway ridership. And this one is about to show you the share bike ridership and everything. So when it's like lacking share bikes right now, everything is automated. You send prompt to those 3 share bike platforms right away for them, tell them that this subway station needs more bikes.
More bikes.
Yeah. Okay, I think.
Okay. Right. So thank you. I have just 1 or 2 more questions before we get started with general Q&A for everybody. One is from one of our participants on Zoom, and I'm going to shorten it considerably beyond what the participant wrote. What is it? You're integrating lots of different kinds of data in this, lots of different layers, lots of different data sources. What's the hardest part about the data integration?
The hardest part of data integration, I feel, is also the incentive part. For example, when researchers go to a transport regulator asking for access to their data, they may have meetings with you, but they don't give you the data subsequently. So you need to show that how this can be valuable to them. Basically, it's also the same thing as what you mentioned about the subway company and the bus company do not talk to each other because they're competing for ridership, right? So then you need to have something. Sometimes it's chicken and egg, but sometimes when you have this breakthrough point, then you can use other cities' data to convince them that, if you share data, if you participate in this, we are showing you a way out to break even. Otherwise, you'll be stuck there and making a loss every year. That is one, right? So I think the hardest part really is getting people on board to share data and also to benefit from data. I give you one example is I think really data in the smart city one, sometimes it's a change of how citizens are participating in managing the city. For example, during COVID in 2020, it struck the taxi ridership a lot. So typically the Chinese cities, they are subsidizing the taxi company so that the taxi driver they do not pay the daily rent, right? But what happened in Chengdu is actually that we based on the daily minimum wage, we back calculate what will be the minimum revenue per taxi per day, right? So then the transport regulator actually use all this data and also the scheme to summon the taxi association, the taxi company, and the representative of the taxi drivers to present a scheme where if the taxi revenue is below 200, then the taxi driver does not need to pay anything because that can help them earn the minimum wage. The moment that it goes like 50 yuan more, so half the driver keeps, another half, 25, will go to a taxi company. So then it becomes really a data part showing that where are people's bottom lines, right? Business has to survive. Taxi driver has to earn at least the minimum wage, right? So then actually that plays out really well. The government didn't pay a cent in contrast to other cities. So yeah, maybe it's a long answer to that, but I feel it's using.
No, I think that's very useful. Thank you very much. let's open the floor to questions. If you would like to ask a question, please wait for the mic. I don't think it's on. No. For Zoom, we have to have it.
Would you mind to talk about the technology architecture of your system? You show the result, but we don't have any idea of the technology architecture, like sensor, how you count the people.
So you're getting data in from various sources.
Yes.
So that data is coming from other places. They don't store all the data themselves. So you're getting that in and running algorithms on the different data. So you've got different modules, I'm sure, inside the ones that were on the video, right?
Yeah. For the answer, maybe we can talk one-to-one offline individually. But I want to say one thing is like we changed our product model due to COVID. Is that previously we are running this as a SaaS service. Basically, the transport regulator, they just push their data to our cloud, and then everything will be running just within 1 day lead time. But then because of data security and all those, we switched our model to an operating system way. For example, we just go to their servers to deploy our software. So within 1 to 2 weeks time, everything will be running. So that is some change we did responding to this data security concerns. But you precise the architecture of how we run the models, we can talk offline later. Yeah.
Okay. And do you have the mic already? Great.
So, hi Andy, amazing work. What you're trying to achieve it through all the data models is amazing, because still the electric mobility has many issues such as the such as charging time and things like that. So I wish to know from you that what do you think about these swappable batteries for vehicles? Could that be a solution for the charging time issue, and could that become a possibility?
Thank you. I am. I cannot say. It's only my personal view and my personal observation. First of all, we are not operating any battery swapping or any EV charging station, so I'm not, affiliated with any interest there. But my observation is this: on battery swapping and the charging, you basically have to to see if there is a huge difference between battery swapping or fast charging, right? For example, if the fast charging of a passenger car only takes 30 minutes, your battery swapping maybe is 10 minutes or something like that, right? You have those different configurations. That may not be a huge enough differences in time for you to choose a more costly solution. And also like for battery swapping, as I understand, maybe a few years back already, before COVID, Guangzhou City near Hong Kong in China, their taxis are using the battery swapping thing. The logistics and the optimization for that is very challenging. So therefore they stop that. Yeah. So maybe battery swapping will be very useful for trucks. So if you have those long haul EV trucks, right, you don't need to have a very long range. Anyway, they are traveling on highway, expressway. So you have those stations, right? The taxi, actually there is certain rules in China that for those logistics, the logistic truck drivers, for every 3 hours or 2 hours, they have to rest for 20 minutes, right? So then that is just perfect for them to stop at those gas stations and battery swapping and then maybe going to the toilet. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay, I have a question from Zoom first. So Anna asked, first of all, she says, thanks for sharing the interesting project. Wondering if or how user data privacy is being protected.
Yes, that's a very good question. Coming from, the school on the other side of the bridge, so I'm always aware of data privacy. I don't want to get myself into trouble, right, by that. So actually all the data you see there, except the taxi driver data, anyway is already public. Anyway, it's already public.
Yeah.
So except the driver one, for commuter trip data, everything is anonymized. So when we get it, it's already anonymized, right? So the first thing we do is that we anonymize the trip data at the regulators, their machine server, and then within their cluster transfer to our machine there to compute, right? So that's anonymized.
Okay.
Yeah, and also it's our company policy that we do not deal with privacy concern data.
Okay, great. Go ahead, back in the back.
So besides launching like this operation in China, I was wondering if you also launched in other countries, and like what are some of the challenges like due to the different government systems to like implement this like big data?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Before that, we are very close in Buenos Aires, in Argentina. But that the COVID and their election in 2019 changed many things. But we are in a process of reactivating our international market, exploration. Yes, you can view, like, I think like always, I'm an optimistic guy. So there are challenges with opportunities, right? Sometimes you feel this city is difficult, right? There are some challenges, but sometimes they give you a very valuable lesson. For example, in Buenos Aires, the city transport department come up with a very smart design compared with the Chinese government, local government, is that they actually, because they need to install the hardware in the taxi, so then they pass a new law by the city council, their legislature, that if the taxi driver install the new device, then they can earn like maybe 10 US cents every trip more, right? So in aggregate, they're earning more with this new device, which is actually people feel safer traveling in those taxis. And then this generates enough revenue for them to make sense that, oh, I want to install this because maybe I'm collecting $60 every month, but I'm only paying $30 every month for this device, right? So this is something we learned from there. Actually, it comes from a challenge that they do not have the data available. They have to install that, but then they come out with their own smart design of how this thing can be paid by itself.
So to some extent, there's different goals for different potential customers, different stakeholders. For example, one of the groups that you haven't mentioned today that will be very interested in this are the insurance companies, right? So they will be much interested in how to minimize the risk of traffic accidents and so forth, right? Other groups will have goals for business optimization, making the most per bus trip that they can make. And yet, if they are too bad and the bus service, people have to wait too long, people find other things to do and they stop using the bus, period. Yeah. So it's interesting how you're using this really incredibly kind of diverse engine to look at these different angles and come up with different solutions for different customers. We've got another question over here. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. So I had a question about the business model. So you mentioned how currently it's being offered as a software as a service. Does that mean like clients currently incur like a monthly subscription fee? Or in the case of China, I guess like the government is your biggest client. So are you guys involved in a more like long-term relationship?
Yes. So I think one of the slides I mentioned about for smart city, there are 3 phases, right? Currently, we're in phase 2, where we are processing the data into insights. This thing kind of is typically paid by government, right? But that is not very scalable. And when we talk about scale with speed, government usually takes you 2 years at least. The first year is applying for budget to do this. Second year is a tendering process. You may or may not win the tender, right? Risky and takes a long time. So that's where phase 3 is very important, is your public-private partnership there, especially when local government is impacted by COVID in terms of their ability to pay, ability to come out with new tenders to pay for things, right? So for example, this express lane can be done in multiple ways. In US, express lane is really you are paying it with Uncle Sam. But in China, maybe you are just using the green token. As the operator for this platform, maybe you can be rewarded with, let's say, 1-to-1 ratio or 2-to-1 ratio you can issue in the green token as well. So this can be some very powerful incentive for you to put ads for certain companies. For example, on charging stations, they want to incentivize the private car or maybe some taxi drivers to go to their charging station to charge, right? Then you can reward them with green token, right? That is one. Secondly, for example, people eating in restaurants at near the subway station, right? So maybe you can also reward them with green token in addition to channeling customers to their restaurant. So it's kind of like using advertisement, etc. They can also do that. The second approach, but maybe a little bit more difficult, is that because you are really helping the bus companies to reduce their cost and increase their ridership, right? So if partnering with them, let's say I'm helping you reduce, reducing cost plus increasing ridership in total. Let's say we're helping you to do 2 billion yuan of value every year. Can you give like 30% of that to MaaS platform in lieu of the fare? For example, you are not giving me 600 million every year, but I will be able to, my users will be able to use 600 million of subway and bus services without paying you, right? That's a way that you can cash out. And also like if people in this sector will know that typically this MaaS weekly pass or monthly pass is for commuters. It has actually certain social responsibility role there in controlling the commuting cost for working class. So basically the MaaS, not only that it can kind of cash out on this economic value, but also it's actually kind of taking care of that social element in controlling the commuting cost for working class.
I'm afraid we're out of time. Just to quickly wrap up for the questions we didn't get to on Zoom, especially as you develop the tokens, of course, you're going to have to develop ways to keep people from gaming the system.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just one of the facets of doing business with these new tools. But I really want to thank you today. It's really exciting to see how this is making an impact on climate as well as improving the efficiency of the city. And we all have a lot to learn from each other in this regard. Thanks so much for coming today, Andy, and very best wishes from this point on.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, everyone.